Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
Imagine trying to solve a really complex puzzle, but every single piece is mislabeled. That's kind of the challenge we're tackling today. When you're dealing with experiences that are incredibly difficult to explain, the words you choose, well, they're everything. They can be the key that unlocks a serious investigation, or they can be the very reason the door gets slammed shut in your face. So how do you get someone to listen? I mean, really listen. How do you convince law enforcement, or doctors, or even your own family to take you seriously when the only words you have sound like they're ripped from a sci-fi movie script? And that's the core problem, right? If the language itself is a barrier, the actual experience, the potential truth, just gets completely lost. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we're going to dive into that confusing mess of terms that are already out there. Then, we'll see how words can literally be used as weapons against you or as armor to protect you. I'll introduce a new framework called CNSI, show you how to use it to sort evidence from noise, and we'll wrap up with a really clear path forward for any investigator. To really get why a new approach is so badly needed, you first have to wade into the chaos. The terminology people use to describe these phenomena is, well, it's a minefield. It's filled with emotionally charged, technically intimidating, and often contradictory labels. Honestly, it's an investigator's absolute nightmare. You see terms like this everywhere. V2K. It's short, it's punchy, and let's be honest, to an outsider, it sounds pretty extreme, doesn't it? It immediately makes people jump to all sorts of conclusions, which is exactly the problem we're trying to solve. It's really more of an accusation than it is a description of what someone is actually experiencing. Then you've got the other end of the spectrum. You get something that sounds super technical, like remote neural monitoring. I mean, it sounds impressive, but it's making a huge assumption about a technology that isn't even publicly proven to exist. So the moment you say that to a scientist or an engineer, you might lose them because you've jumped right over reporting an experience to stating an unproven scientific claim as fact. And then there are labels like this one, psychotronic torture. This term is just packed with emotion. It's got all this historical baggage from the Cold War, and while it definitely describes a profound sense of suffering, to an outsider it can sound more like a conspiracy theory than a report of a verifiable event. So, this brings us to the most crucial question. How do you move forward? If every label you can possibly use is a potential dead end, how in the world do you build a case? How do you report what's happening in a way that actually invites investigation instead of immediate dismissal? That's the problem we're here to solve. Let's be perfectly clear. This isn't just about semantics or being picky about words. The words you choose are strategic. They can become a weapon that's used to dismiss you, or they can be the armor that protects your credibility. This slide lays it out perfectly. See, language is doing three different jobs all at the same time. First, it paints a picture in the listener's mind. Second, it sends a powerful signal about you, whether you seem credible or not. And third, those first two things directly determine the outcome. Will an institution like the police or the FCC actually listen, or are they just going to file it away in the crank folder? And this right here, this brilliantly illustrates the difference. On the left, you've got a loaded declaration. It names a perpetrator and a super exotic mechanism, all without any proof. It forces the listener to accept a whole bunch of huge assumptions all at once. But on the right, you have a factual report. It just describes the sensory experience, plainly and accurately, without any speculation. One invites ridicule, the other invites questions and a real investigation. And here's the really critical insight, something you have to get. Using unbelievable language might actually be doing an attacker's job for them. I mean, think about it. If someone wanted to get away with something, what's the perfect cover? Making the person reporting it sound completely unbelievable. And of course, all this chaos is a goldmine for scammers. So your first and your best defense is disciplined language. Okay, so we've seen the problem from every angle. So what's the solution? A project called Mind Shield created a framework specifically to build that linguistic armor we were just talking about. It's a new, neutral language designed from the ground up just for investigation. The term is covert neurosensory intrusion, or CNSI for short. Let's just break that down really quick. Covert means it's hidden or deniable. Neurosensory, well, that refers to its effects on the brain and the senses. And intrusion frames it as an unwanted interference. But the key word here is alleged. It's an umbrella label for alleged technical interference. It doesn't claim to know the source. It just creates a case file for the reported experience. So these are the three pillars of the whole CNSI framework. It's neutral. It avoids all speculation about who or what is responsible. It's structured. It gives you a consistent way to categorize and log what's happening. And maybe most importantly, it's defensible. Because it's based on just describing observable effects, it creates a rock-solid foundation for any report you'd give to legal or scientific professionals.
So how does this actually work in practice? I mean, a framework is only useful if it helps you organize information, right? And that's exactly what CNSI is designed to do. It gives you a system for sorting through all the claims, all the speculation, and all the evidence.
It sets up three distinct labels for any piece of information. Documented, that's reserved for stuff confirmed by peer-reviewed science or official, declassified government sources, top-tier stuff. Reported is for consistent patterns we see in eyewitness testimony, even if the how isn't proven. And hypothesis is for plausible theories that still need evidence and testing. This system prevents us from mixing solid facts with speculation. This table is a perfect example of how to use those labels. The microwave auditory effect, that's documented, thanks to Alan Frey's 1961 study and tons of later research. The term voice-to-skull, or V2K, we label that reported. Why? Because thousands of people report the experience, but the specific tech isn't publicly confirmed. And finally, something like remote neuromonitoring lands in the hypothesis category. There are patents out there, sure, but there's no public, peer-reviewed proof of a working technology that can do it. See how clean that is? And you know, this history really matters. This isn't some new conversation that just popped up on the internet. In 1961, Frey documented the auditory effect. In the 70s, the US discovered its Moscow embassy was being bathed in microwaves. In 74, a researcher at Walter Reed reported transmitting recognizable spoken words using microwaves. And of course, more recently, Havana syndrome brought this whole issue of directed energy right back into the mainstream. The CNSI framework respects this documented history without jumping to wild conclusions. All right, so we've looked at the problem, we've got the framework. Let's bring it all home by turning this into a concrete set of actions. How does an individual investigator, how do you use this to build a credible case file? Here they are, the three fundamental rules for writing an incident report using CNSI safe language. Rule number 1, never, ever name a perpetrator unless you have concrete, verifiable proof. 2, describe the effect, not the exotic tech you think is causing it. And 3, just stick to plain sensory language. What did you see, hear, or feel, and when and where did it happen? I'm telling you, this discipline alone can dramatically upgrade your credibility.
And this slide right here perfectly captures the entire workflow. First, you log it. Every single detail, date, time, location, what happened. Then you preserve it. Make sure any evidence is kept safe and backed up. Then, and this is so important, you try to validate it. This means getting third-party verification. Can an engineer detect a signal? Can a doctor confirm a physiological effect? This step is absolutely crucial. And only then, once you've done that work, do you escalate it by taking your documented case file to the proper authorities.
I want to leave you with this thought. It's adapted from a very ancient piece of wisdom. In an investigation this complex, this contentious, patience and discipline are your greatest assets. The urge to jump to conclusions, to name a perpetrator or a technology, it's a trap. The path to the truth is methodical, it is careful, and it is built one verifiable fact at a time.
So, we've learned that the right language is the foundation for everything. But what about the investigation itself? In our next explainer, we're going to tackle a huge challenge. How do you gather evidence without falling into what I call the panic trap? That cycle of fear that can absolutely destroy your credibility and your relationships. We'll see you then.